News when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow.
All right, Karen, the U.S. war with Iran may be headed into a new phase after the breakdown of peace talks in Pakistan over the weekend. President Trump says the U.S. will begin a full naval blockade of the Strait of Hormuz and retaliate against any Iranian resistance. The president announced it on his way back to Washington last night from Miami.
10 o'clock tomorrow, we have a blockade going into effect. That'll be 10 o'clock tomorrow. Other nations are working so that Iran will not be able to sell oil. And that will be very effective.
President Trump did not elaborate on which countries would help with the blockade. We get more from Bloomberg's Jumana Bersetchi in Dubai.
The U.S. will be sending more warships, submarines, perhaps surveillance aircraft to monitor all of the vessels' movements throughout the course of the Strait. President Trump has also said that they will start interdicting any ships that agree to pay a fee or a transit fee to get through. And then they will begin with the minesweeping exercises as well, possibly by deploying specialists or even submarines in that space too.
Bloomberg's Jumana Bersetchi reports Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps has warned that any military vessel attempting to approach the strait would be considered a violation of the ceasefire. This morning, 3 tankers are trying to cross the strait ahead of the blockade by sailing close to Iran's coast.
Well, Nathan, this latest move in the Iran war is drawing a sharp reaction in Washington. Democratic Senator Tim Kaine says it never should have gone this far.
We had a diplomatic control over Iran not seeking a nuclear weapon that Donald Trump decided to tear up. And we had an open Strait of Hormuz and reasonable gas prices up until February 27th when Donald Trump launched this war without the support of allies, the American public, or Congress.
And Democrat Tim Kaine appeared on ABC's This Week, but Republican Congressman Mike Turner says President Trump should have more international support for the blockade. He was a guest on CBS's Face the Nation.
The straits are not just a United States issue. It is also a Europe issue. It is a worldwide issue. And Iran should not be permitted to just decide who gets through.
And former White House National Security Advisor John Bolton says President Trump should not stop with a blockade.
The only way to get true peace and security in the Middle East is to have regime change in Iran. You can negotiate all you want with these people. It's not going to change anything.
And former National Security Advisor John Bolton spoke on Bloomberg this weekend. Catch that show along with Face the Nation and This Week every Sunday on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, Karen, President Trump isn't just going after Iran. He's also attacking Pope Leo XVI after a series of rebukes from the American-born pontiff over the war and the idea that God is on the U.S. side.
We don't like a pope that's going to say that it's okay to have a nuclear weapon. We don't want a pope that says crime is okay in our cities. I don't like it. I'm not a big fan of Pope Leo.
The President Trump again speaking with reporters on the tarmac in Miami. He also attacked Pope Leo XIV in a social media post that included an image of himself dressed in robes and healing a sick patient surrounded by a medical worker and military members.
Well, Nathan, the UK will not take part in the proposed U.S. blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. Let's go to London and get the very latest with Bloomberg's Ewan Potts. And Ewan, it looks like another point of contention between President Trump and Prime Minister Keir Starmer.
Karen and Nathan, the British government continues to call for freedom of navigation and the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. But Bloomberg has learned the UK will not take part in President Trump's plan to blockade the waterway. Prime Minister Keir Starmer is set to lead another round of talks with other nations on reopening the strait. But on the US blockade, Starmer's position is again at odds with the US president. In London, I'm Ewan Potts, Bloomberg Radio.
Okay, Ewan, thank you. Well, we are seeing some very big moves in energy markets this morning following the latest war developments. Right now, Brent crude is higher by 7.6%, trading above $102 a barrel. West Texas Intermediate's up 7.8% at $104.15. Energy Aspects founder Amrita Sen tells Bloomberg this weekend markets have been in denial.
You know, what surprised me in this market is this consistent belief. I would say a lot of the macro traders have that somehow there will be a resolution because the alternative is just too difficult to fathom, too difficult to kind of really think through and say, okay, what does this do to the global economy? I don't disagree with that, except that that's not the reason why the strait is shut to begin with.
And Energy Aspects founder Amrita Sen says much of the supply shock damage has already been done. She calls it the biggest energy shortfall in history, and stocks are falling this morning as well. S&P futures are down more than 0.5%. Dow futures are lower by nearly 0.5%, and NASDAQ futures on the decline by 0.6%.
Well, Nathan, another major political story that we're following comes out of Hungary. After 16 years in power, Viktor Orban's rule is coming to an end. Peter Magyar's opposition TISA party is on track to win with almost all votes counted. Bloomberg chief Europe correspondent Oliver Cook has more from Budapest.
It changes a lot of things very fundamentally, and also the margin by which Peter Magyar was able to crush Viktor Orban, who was going for his fourth consecutive term after 16 years in power. He now has a two-thirds majority, Peter Magyar. That means that he can legislate very freely with a free hand over Hungary. It also means he can make changes to the constitution, which is something that Viktor Orban enjoyed during his last term. So it's really a significant victory, but also the margin is very, very relevant. In terms of what he'll actually have to do to turn the economy around, that gets a little bit more complicated. I mean, he's inheriting some of the same problems that brought Viktor Orban down, a stagnant economy, but he's vowed to change things, to turn things around in the economy, to sort of cut out the corruption.
And that's Bloomberg chief Europe correspondent Oliver Crook reporting from Budapest. And stocks in Hungary are up 2.5% on the election results. And that's news when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Karen Moscow.
I'm Nathan Hager, and this is Bloomberg.